Hey guys, so before I set you the project to go off and do by yourselves, I thought it would be useful to take you through the other example pop animations that I made that are available in the class materials as a bit of inspiration. So let's open up the allthepops.aep project file, which is available to download below, and I'll take you through it now. So when you open this up, it should have a folder in here called comps, and then I've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 balloons and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pops. So the pops are the actual pop animations. So this is what I'm going to be taking you through. And balloons 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is just the same thing with the pops comped in. So I want to keep this kind of brief because it's more of just an inspiration thing and you can explore it on your own. But I'm just going to go through each one and just kind of briefly explain how I approach the animation. So the number 1 is the one that we made. The number 2 is the ones with sparkles. So this one is actually quite a bit different from the one that we made. I made this big sparkle shape, which I just made out of a poly star, which is one of the different shape types you can make. So I didn't take you through that before. I was just showing you the pen tool to make shape layers, but you can also use this shape tool to make shape layers. And there's a rectangle, rounded rectangle, circles, and polygon tool, and a star tool. And the poly star is what I used. And instead of coming up with a path in the shape layer, it comes up with a shape. So this would be rectangle or ellipse or whatever you've chosen. And I chose the star, and the star has all these different options. So you can determine the number of points. So you can change the number of points here, and you can do the roundness, which is how I made this sort of like inverted diamond kind of shape, outer roundness. So you can have a fiddle with that. It's quite fun. And then the animation is, the first frame is this single pop. I'll just hide these things so we can see it better. And then I just made a different shape layer for every single star that animates. So the big one just shrinks down, and then you get this ring of flashing stars afterwards. And if I select all my layers and press U, you can see the animation. I mean, I guess all of these are going to be the same, but I've just arranged them in a circle. So let's just select one. And I've offset them randomly as well, so that you get this kind of random sparkle variation to the animation. But I'm essentially animating the scale up and down, and also the position. So the position, if I bring my guides back, you can see they just go from the middle outwards, and they slow down. So I've used an easing to slow that down, and then they just drift down. And the way I've done the drift down is that I've parented all of these to a null. So that's another thing that you can do in After Effects, which is really powerful, is I took all of these and I made a null, which I won't get into too much, but it's just basically a nothing layer. It's just got position information, and I use the parent tool here just to connect them all. Sorry if I'm going over this quickly, otherwise I don't want to get this to be too bloated. It's going to be really complicated for me to explain every little bit, but essentially that's how I did the drift down. You could have just done it by animating the vertical position of all of these, but it was much quicker for me to just do one vertical position that just, you can see this red box moving down, and they all drift down with that red box, and you can do that using this parenting thing. So you can just select which one you want it to follow, and the layer will just follow the animation on that one. So that's basically how it works. Pop 3 is this circle. So the starts off as a circle, and then you have another circle inside that animates inwards. And there's a few different ways of doing that. So let's just figure out how I did this. So actually, I'll start with these 4 lines. The 4 lines that come out is the same as Pop 1, only I've just used 4 of them to create this kind of target shape. So that's the same as Pop 1. And then the new thing is this big circle in the middle, and I animated that using the stroke width. That's a good way of doing it. So it's just an ellipse path, another shape that you can select up here using the ellipse tool. And I drew a circle, and the circle size, which you can control here, just gets bigger over time. So that does our sort of ease out. And then the stroke width goes from really thick to really thin. So it looks, the stroke width is just so thick it looks like a circle, and then it gets thinner as the circle expands. Number 4 is the sparkles one. This one is also, this has got a few more elements going on here. I've got this circle in the middle that just shrinks, which I think is this layer. So that just goes down over 2 frames and disappears. And then I've got this. So this is also pop 1 again. So this is the same pop as we've done on pop 1. I think I've just made it a bit smaller. You can solo layers if you click this button. And then, so you can just see this one layer that I've got selected by clicking that button. And then if you click it again, it goes back. So it's just 4 again of our pop number 1. And I've actually got 2 of them. So there's another one around here somewhere. I haven't named these layers. Apologies for that. I think it's this one. Yeah. If you open up the transform, you can go to rotation and you can see that I've rotated it by 45 degrees. And that's allowed me to have 2 offset in time. So I've dragged this along a little bit so that they don't go off at the same time. They go off slightly one after the other. And you get this 4 pattern and then another 4 pattern on the diagonal. So they're slightly offset. So it's kind of the same as before. So it's 8 as like the same as pop 1, but I've offset them. And I did that by making one with 4, duplicating it and rotating it so that I can have 8, but they just go off at different times. And then I've actually got smaller ones. So these smaller ones are also pop 1 again, but I've made them again smaller. And I've just lined them up with the ends of the line. So it looks like they come out from the middle and then each one splits again into another little pop. And then I've just offset them again. So this is the same technique just over and over again, but just different sizes. And I've timed them differently. And then you get this nice sort of fireworks kind of thing. And then pop 5 is a different technique. So we've got a little bit of the end of pop 1. So I'm using pop 1 again. This is a really good technique because I'm using it lots of times in these different pops. So it's just a really short one. So you get this nice kind of like burst impression. And then this circle, I'm using a completely different technique to the other circle because I wanted it to be offset. So there's no way you can do that with a stroke. The easier way is to have one circle that's getting bigger, and then you have another circle that's cutting out the first circle. And you can do that using these track matte settings. So this might look different depending on which version of After Effects you've got because they've recently changed this. But essentially what you can do is you have one circle. So this is the shape layer 1 that I've got in the middle with this circle. And then I've got another circle, and you can see that I've moved it slightly to the top right. And then offset the animation slightly so that you see the first one first and then the second one expands afterwards. And then I've used the track matte so that it cuts out the circle. And then the interesting thing that I've done with this one is when I comped it, I then colored the pops to match the balloon color so that you can see the blue one, the yellow one, and the red one all have the pop slightly colored. And the way I did that is with an effect. We didn't cover any effects so far in this tutorial, which is ironic considering the name of the program is After Effects, but we actually just looked at shape layers. But if you click on a layer and go to, this is probably closed if you're using the default After Effects, but if you go to Window at the top here and go down to, not that one, Effects Controls. So underneath Composition, there'll be Effects Controls for that layer. And it should open this panel here next to the Project tab. It will open it, Effects Controls tab. And when you open it, it will look blank like this. And the effect that I've used, there's loads of effects in here. If you've used Photoshop, these are basically like filters. And you go down and there's a whole bunch of things here that you can probably take another tutorial to do. But the effect that I used is, it's actually just called Fill. So you go to Generate, so you right click on your Effects Controls, you go to Generate and you click on Fill. And then that will give you, it will just fill that layer with a color. And the default is red. So I'm just going to undo that so that it goes back to my blue. But you essentially you can either pick the color. I used a slightly faded blue, and then that's how I made all these a different color. And I also actually rotated the pop so they're all slightly different to each other. Otherwise, they would all just look identical. But the key to this was doing the change in this composition rather than the actual pop composition. Because if you colored it in here, then you'd go to your balloons and they would all be the same color. But you could actually use the fill on top of that. But there's no point. There's no point coloring it in the comp if you're just going to use a different color in the balloons comp. So there you go. So that's a quick overview of how I made all these different pops. I hope that's given you a bit of inspiration for when you make your own pop. Great, so hopefully that's given you a little insight into what's possible with the pop animations and also how it changes the feel of the overall finished animation. So when the balloons pop and disappear, it kind of gives them a completely different look and vibe when they actually pop. In the next video, I'm going to be setting you a little bit of homework so that you can apply the knowledge that you've learned in this class to something practical. And we'll also be doing a little bit of a wrap up. So I hope you'll join me there.